Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. St. Patrick's Day 2021. Wow. Well, as you can see, I've got my Irishy kind of hat on, my cap today. I know it looks beat up, okay? But I've had this cap for many, many years, and I take it with me on all my travels. It has been in Ireland and England and all over Europe and China. I've taken this, it's all beat up. It looks terrible. People try to give me money when I wear it out on the street to go get something to eat. Uh, but anyway, but I love it, and it's my cozy hat. So happy thanks or St. Patrick's Day. We are reading from my book, The Magick of Aleister Crowley, and we're at the very beginning, or near the very beginning, and we're talking about the magical aeons and things like that. And yesterday, when I read the chapter concerning the evolution of magical formula, I mentioned the fact of the astrological ages as well as the magical ages. And there was a very important footnote concerning the astrological ages. You've heard that we're in the age of Aquarius and things like that. So here's that footnote. The great astrological year lasts approximately 2,600 years and is divided into 12 periods of approximately 2,166 years, corresponding to each of the 12 signs of the zodiac. Because the sun does not quite make it, well, from our point of view anyway, please, the sun has its own movement, but from our point of view, because the sun does not quite make it back to its starting point each year, it appears to slowly regress backwards through the zodiac at the rate of about one sign every 2,166 years. This is why the age of Aquarius follows that of Pisces, which followed that of Aries. Now that's a phenomena that is caused by the obliquity in the Earth's axis as it turns around. It, like everything astronomical, it's an optical illusion. Like the dimension we're in, it's an optical illusion. I'm going to read the last paragraphs of yesterday's talk that sort of set us up for today's. We were talking about the formula, the magical formula of the new Aeon. Crowley recognized in the three principal gods of Egypt, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the characteristic formulae of the last three magical Aeons. This present Aeon is that of Horus, which has followed the Aeon of Osiris, which followed the Aeon of Isis. Each Aeon is characterized by the level of understanding of nature and of self contemporarily prevalent, and dictates the variety of magical, religious expression that dominate these periods. Here it will be necessary to take a moment to review the myth of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, for it's vitally important to the understanding of the evolution of the magical formulae of the Magick of Thelema. Please keep in mind that this is only the briefest sketch of a story that has undergone over 4,000 years of revision. And that's where we left off yesterday. Today we start with the myth of Osiris. I wish I could cue some atmospheric harp music or something, but You'll have to just imagine this. But it's story time. The Creator, Tamu, first appeared from out of a watery chaos on a sacred mound. Upon this solid foundation of matter, he masturbated, creating two children, brother and sister, Shu and Tefnet. These two, in turn, created Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess, who united to give birth to Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. These 9 deities make up the Aeneid of Heliopolis, which appear continually throughout the sacred texts. Osiris became king of Egypt, supported by his sister wife Isis. Theirs was a golden reign that raised the Egyptian people from the subhuman depths of anarchy and cannibalism. They initiated the systematic cultivation of the land in harmony with the flooding cycle of the River Nile, and their administration brought prosperity and happiness. Seth, the brother of Osiris, became increasingly envious of the success of his sibling and conspired to have him assassinated. Secretly, he had an ornate box constructed to the exact measurements of the body of Osiris. He then hosted a lavish party for his brother and announced that he would award the box to anyone who could fit perfectly inside. In what can only be described as an act of divine folly, Osiris volunteered to give it a try. And as soon as he was comfortably snuggled inside the perfectly fitting box, the lid was immediately nailed shut by 72 of Seth's co-conspirators, and the coffin set adrift on the Nile. Isis, hearing of the murder, immediately set out to find the body. She discovered it at Byblos, where it had become embedded in a tree which had been cut down and used, because of its wondrous aroma, as a column in the palace of the king. She pleaded with the local king for the return of her husband's body and was allowed to take it. As she was returning with it by boat, she lay down upon the body and kissed it until its phallus became miraculously erect. She mounted her dead husband and conceived the child Horus. Horus, or Hur, also has a brother, Hur-par-Krat, whom the Greeks called Harpocrates. More on this later. Seth, discovering where Isis had hidden the body, stole it and dismembered it and scattered the 14 pieces throughout the entire country. Isis set out again and successfully recovered all the pieces of Osiris save one. We can guess which one that was. And magically reassembled them, thereby bestowing upon Osiris immortality and rulership of the afterlife. Henceforth, pious individuals who faithfully adhered to the complex magical formula of the cult of Osiris as outlined in the Book of the Dead would be assured of the same continuity of existence after death. Their son Horus, to avenge the murder of his father, initiated a mighty struggle against Seth, which, according to some stories, was successful after 3 days, and according to others, is perpetuated to this day. The images of this simple passion play are embedded deeply in the collective consciousness of the human race. We see it retold almost verbatim by the Greeks as the story of Demeter and Persephone, and Orpheus and Eurydice. Iao, that's I-A-O, the great god of the Gnostics, even announces the magical formula of life, death, and resurrection in the letters of its name. I for Isis, nature, is ruined by Apophis, A, the forces of destruction and decay, but is cyclically resurrected in Osiris, O, E-A-O. Most striking to the Western mind are the similarities between the story of Osiris and the central myth of Christianity. Through treachery, a wise young savior is murdered, nailed to his death, the tree whereon the body is affixed, the mourning devotee who begs the return of his body in order to give it a proper burial, the resurrection of the God, which also provides the formula for eternal salvation of the world, etc. It's all very Osirian. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand where we are, we must first understand where we've been. So let's first examine the conditions that characterize the last two aeons. And let me just check my watch here. Okay. We're going to look at the Aeon of Isis. This is 2 aeons ago. The Aeon of Isis, the formula of the great goddess. It's difficult to speculate precisely when the Aeon of the formula of Isis began, for its foundations are laid in the nebulousness of prehistory. However, we can with relative confidence venture to pinpoint its zenith as being approximately 2400 BC. This was the age of the great goddess, and nowhere at this time was her worship more conspicuous than in the Sumerian city of Uruk, where the magnificent temple of Inanna, Ishtar, dominated civilization's first great city. For us to focus exclusively upon Sumeria, however, would be a grave error, for indeed, the cult of the great goddess was truly universal. She was worshipped by countless cultures under myriad names and forms. It would also be a mistake for us to conclude that the magical formula of this period manifested exclusively through the worship of any particular anthropomorphic female deity. For, like every aeon, the magical formula of the Aeon of Isis was founded upon mankind's interpretation of the perceived facts of nature. And our Isian age progenitors perceived nature as a continuous process of spontaneous growth. In the dim beginnings of the Aeon, humans were ignorant of the cause and effect mysteries of sex and birth. Life appeared to come from woman alone. Blood flowed inexplicably from her body, and with the same cycle as that of the moon. And when the cycle of bleeding was interrupted, her belly swelled for 9 moons until she burst with new life. She then continued to nourish this life with her milk, the white blood of her breasts, and without this nourishment drawn directly from her body, the new life would die. Nothing could match the power of woman. From her, all life proceeded, and without her nourishment, no life could survive. Like the moon itself, she lived a threefold life cycle of maid, mother, and crone. Fertility, sustenance, and wisdom. Once the child was weaned, the earth itself became surrogate mother, directly providing the flesh and blood of animals and plants for sustenance. Mother was life, earth was mother, God was woman. Death was a mystery that could not be solved nor overcome. This fundamental perception of nature persisted long after the mystery of where babies came from had been solved. Matriarchies and cannibalism dominated much of this period. But even after the ascent of the male warrior gods, the essential formula of the goddess lived on. There exist to this day tribes of hunter-gatherers whose social and religious lives exemplify the formula of Isis. But we're losing those very fast. But the Aeon of Isis survived only as long as the spirit of humanity was dominated by the perception that life and its requisite nourishment came directly from the earth and from woman. A clearer perception of the universe would evolve that would usurp the formula of Isis and initiate a new cultural and religious age. We are painfully familiar with this period, for it lasted until the turn of the 20th century. Its formula is still the consensus of the so-called great religions and continues to dominate the spiritual lives of the majority of inhabitants on our planet. In this age, the focus was shifted from the earth to the sun as the source of all life. And it shifted from the mysteries of birth to the mysteries of death. We figured out where babies came from. Now we were to ponder where we go when we die. The next segment is the Aeon of Osiris. I wouldn't dare break here tonight. I gotta go on. Excuse me if I'm making you late this morning. The Aeon of Osiris, the formula of the dying god. It could be said that the Aeon of Osiris began when men and women first became cognizant of the sun and recognized that the fertility of the earth, and consequently their lives, depended directly upon the vitalizing power of sunlight. The secret of life was now perceived as a partnership of sun and earth. And our ancestors saw this partnership reflected in themselves: man, woman, phallus, kittis, father, mother. When it became universally acknowledged that without the sun, the earth would perish, and without the semen of man, woman would remain barren, the great pendulum of racial consciousness and attitude took a radical swing. The formula of Isis was altered. Woman brings forth life, but life comes from the sun. God was now Father. This new illumination resulted in unprecedented advances in civilization. Armed with the solar knowledge of the cycles of seasons, Osirian age farmers began the organized cultivation of crops. Cities arose, and with them the economies and armies of great nation states. Patriarchies supplanted matriarchies as the goddesses of countless cultures became wives to the new male deities. But inherent in this new formula was a terrible mystery, a factor that was not part of the formula of the innocent Aeon of Isis, a dark reality that would become an all-consuming, and some say unhealthy, preoccupation of the Aeon of Osiris, death. It was perceived as an undeniable fact that the sun, the source of all life, was born each day on the eastern horizon and traveled across the sky, bestowing his warm blessings of light and life upon the earth. It was also observed that this great progenitor died each day in the west, plunging the entire world into a cold darkness, a darkness that evoked introspection and fear. Where did the sun go? Would a new one ever appear? Each night after the death of the sun, our early Osirian age ancestors fell into an uneasy slumber, and in that sleep lived another life, a strange life, peopled with other men and women, and filled with impossible wonders and horrors. Animals killed in the hunt, dead relatives, enemies and comrades, all came alive again in this other world of dream. Was this where the sun went at night? Was this the land of the dead? Of course, the fearful night did not last forever, and a new sun appeared with comforting regularity each morning to conquer the darkness and assure the continuity of life. But later, more sophisticated sun watchers would experience an even greater insecurity crisis when they observed that the dwindling periods of sunlight as summer moved toward winter resulted in the decrease or actual cessation of the fecundity of the earth. No sunlight, no crops. This was serious. The daily solar cycle showed them that the sun is capable of totally disappearing from the sky. But unlike the relatively short periods of darkness of the daily cycle, there was no telling how long the great night would last if the sun ever experienced a yearly death. Surely all life would end in the frozen darkness of an eternal, or even lengthy, night. Unfounded as these fears are, they were based solidly upon a perceived reality, and the trauma became indelibly imprinted upon the psyche of the human race. This reality in turn formed the foundation of the magical formula of the Aeon of Osiris, the formula of the dying god. The sun, the father of all life, goes through a threefold cycle of birth, or life, then death, then resurrection. Humankind, knowing themselves also subject to death, believe that by following the magical or religious formula of the sun, they too could be made eligible for resurrection. And what was this formula? Everywhere our Osirian age ancestors looked, they saw the drama of the dying god enacted. The farmer observed the fertilizing effects that blood and decaying flesh had upon the soil, and that seeds, which came from living plants in the summer and autumn, could lie dead and buried throughout the winter months, then miraculously resurrect as new plants in the spring. It was an obvious and inescapable truth. Without death, there is no life. Did not the sun suffer death each night and each winter so it might be reborn? Did not the seed offer itself to the earth so that it might resurrect as a new plant? After ejaculation, did not the penis sacrifice its potency to fertilize the ovum and perpetuate the race? Life from death was a fact. And to assure that the blessings of life would continue to come out of death, our Osirian age ancestors believed they must take part, an active part, in the great life-death ritual. To this end, they took to themselves to mountaintops and high places. They gathered stones and proceeded to build altars and offer up sacrifices to the gods. Obviously, the great cultural religious myth of the Egyptians was literally Osirian in nature. But by the dawn of the astrological age of Pisces, approximately 260 BC, the formula of the dying god had crystallized itself as the central myth of countless cultures and civilizations. The gods of the great mystery cults, Orpheus, Heracles, Dionysus, Attis, Adonis, and later Christ, all were slain and resurrected. The story of Persephone, the central figure of the Eleusinian mysteries, which flourished for over 2,000 years, is a perfect example of the evolution of the formula of the great goddess to that of the dying god. These cults were wildly popular. To assure one's own resurrection, it was necessary to be an initiate and follow the god's formula of catastrophe, love, death, and resurrection. Partially patterned after these mystery schools, Orthodox Christianity rose to become the dominant spiritual and political influence of the world for the last 2,000 years. The formula of sacrifice was born of the mistaken belief that the sun came up in the morning and went down in the evening. It's as simple as that. A more accurate perception of the universe is now enjoyed by humanity. We know the sun does not come up, nor does it go down. It does not travel north in the summer, nor does it move toward extinction in the south in the winter. The sun stays on all the time. The light is continuous. The death of the sun is merely an optical illusion, a shifting of a shadow. So universally accepted is this simple fact of nature that today we seldom give it a second thought. Yet the archetypes that influence the great cultural and religious forces of today are formulated during those eras of profound ignorance and superstition. The stories of the dying god and the dying sun were myths created in part to help our ancestors overcome their fear of the dark and their fear of death. The perception of the universe that initiated the Aeon of Osiris has been forever changed. The formula has been amended. There is no need to fear the dark. There is no need to fear death. And that's where we better stop today. Tomorrow we will talk about the all-important Aeon of Horus and the magical formula of the Magick of Aleister Crowley, the Magick of Thelema. So until tomorrow, enjoy your St. Patrick's Day. I won't tell you not to overdo it, but don't overdo it on the road. Or anyway, enjoy yourself. Be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.